Hey LinkedIn, and welcome back to Business Unusual. This is a live show brought to you by the LinkedIn News team, where we're talking as a community about the changing nature of work. I'm your host, Caroline Fairchild, coming to you from my home office here in New York City. It's Wednesday, August 12th, and here's a quick look at the top stories that are trending right now on LinkedIn. More than a dozen top New York City employers are banding together to hire 100,000 low-income and minority residents by 2030. JP Morgan Chase, Ernst & Young, and IBM planned the pact before the pandemic. They will offer paid learning opportunities to some 25 students and ditch undergraduate degree requirements for many entry-level positions. And over in San Francisco, 1 in 8 residents are lacking high-speed internet access, according to the San Francisco Chronicle. Now that many jobs are taking place at home, those without fast, affordable, and reliable connections are facing greater barriers to employment. For more stories like these, be sure to check out the news module to the right of your LinkedIn feed. And that brings us to the poll that we have for you today. The pandemic has brought on a rise in telehealth, and we're asking members right now on the LinkedIn news page, do you think virtual visits will become a permanent part of how doctors care for patients? A, yes, B, no, C, unclear. Vote for your answer in the stream right now, but also tell us how you're feeling about telehealth and what you think the future of medicine will look like. We will have a conversation about that at the end of the show when we reveal the results of the poll. That brings us to the main story that we have for you today. Only 2.7% of venture capital dollars went to women-founded companies here in the US last year. And the numbers are even worse for women of color. When you take a whole look at what capital went in 2019 to female-founded companies, $3.54 billion went to all women female founders. To put that in perspective, now struggling co-working company WeWork raised $5 billion during that same period. That's nearly $1.5 billion more than all female founders combined. On today's show, we'll speak with a panel of founders and investors who are working to change that. Julie Castro Abrams will join us. She is the founder and CEO of How Women Lead. She's going to discuss the firm's debut $10 million fund that's focused on founding women founders, particularly female founders of color. She'll join us for a conversation, and then she'll be met by Vivian Sue, who is also part of the fund, and the fund's first female founder, Sheila Talton. Before I bring on our guests, we want to hear from you. The whole point of this conversation is to speak with you in the stream. So if you're joining us right now, thank you for joining us on Business Unusual. We want to know what's going on with the ground for you, why you've decided to join us on today's show. So comment, say hello to each other, and if you have questions for any of our experts, be sure to let us know. And with that, I want to bring on Julie Castro Abrams to the show. Hi, Julie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Okay, I have to ask you about Kamala. I feel like I can't ask the founder of How Women Lead to not comment on what her appointment means and what you think it's really going to mean for the topic that we're talking about right now, which is how the private sector is thinking about investing in women, and particularly women of color.
Well, I have to tell you, yesterday I felt like a lot of people were like, oh, maybe this is the tipping point where we're finally turning a corner. But I think for so many of us, this really represents just that breath of like, okay, humanity and real, like we're back on track maybe with Kamala as the candidate for vice president. To me, she really represents America. She's a mixed background. She's a kick-ass, super educated, highly educated woman who's worked her tail off throughout her whole life. And even if you just look at her family makeup, so she represents what America is today, which is a blended cultural family. And that's what we should all be celebrating, right?
Right. Talk about what America represents today. But as we talked about at the top of the show, the venture capital industry is way behind in terms of making sure that their investments are diverse. Yeah. This was an issue before the pandemic. The numbers are not moving at the right pace. Why has the industry been so slow to change?
Well, it's a very insular industry and it can't be regulated to start with. So those industries that are regulated, like we worked on legislation around public company director composition, you can regulate that because it's public companies, but private companies that are venture backed, it's like, you can't tell me where I can invest my own money is the concept, right? But this is the thing that we all work against our best interest. Unfortunately, the data is super clear. We have 20 years of data that shows that women make more for their investors. They're a better risk. And if we actually, there's a great article that came out last week by Morgan Stanley that said if venture capitalists invested in women founders, we could put $4.4 trillion into the hands of the investors themselves. So it's biased and it's deeply embedded and it's really part of the venture system. Like people, are taking a bet on somebody. So they're investing in people they trust. And the way our brains work is we trust people who are like us, people we're familiar with. And so without using data as a decision-making tool or another way to reduce bias, it's just filled with bias. It's all your gut about who do you think is going to be the best win. And our guts tell us somebody who looks just like us is the person we should bet on because we trust ourselves. Right?
So what are your goals with this new fund? I know that you're thinking a little bit differently about how you're funding female founders through this fund. Talk me through a little bit how the model may be different than, say, other funds that are also supporting female founders.
Well, this is the thing. We're at this interesting moment in time where we get to see the 5 to 10 years worth of data and results of gendered funds. This is not a brand new concept, but the other people paved the way and did the hard work, and we get to learn from their successes and the things that were challenging for them. So we really created a disciplined process that really picks up all of the successful elements. And I'll tell you, one of the most if you want to bet on somebody just based on data, Black women return more for their investors than any other founder that you can find. So, so focusing on women of color is a really critical strategy for us. It's not an exclusionary strategy, but it's a core part of what we seek. And what we decided is we're going to put women of color at the center in everything to reduce, among other things, to reduce bias from the system. So our decision makers are women of color. A majority of our LPs, our limited partners, our investors are women of color. And that's the biggest differentiator. That means we're going to find the women founders because they know the other women of color, right? They know our LPs. We're going to find them. They're going to feel excited to talk to us. They're going to trust us and want us on their cap tables. So all along the process, women of color and women, focus on women is the centerpiece.
And on top of the focus of investing in women of color, you're also excluding male-female founded teams, which I thought was interesting and something that I haven't heard before. Why the focus on just female founded teams?
Well, that number you started us off with, that 2.7 number, which was 2.5 and 2.9 and 2, it literally never moves out of the 2%. That's women founded companies. We actually see a better, more like 15%. The numbers have kind of changed, but somewhere in the mid-teens for female and male founded teams. So they get more play and more resources. So we're trying to address that very knotty problem of just women founded companies. There's also some interesting data that shows that those founders perform better. They also do some other things that are kind of interesting. Again, Morgan Stanley, that same report that came out last week showed that women founders hire 6 times more women in their companies. When it's a male-female founder, they hire 2.4% more women on their teams. But if you want to get, our pandemic, one of the biggest issues we're seeing is women are the ones losing jobs and employment opportunities. So if you want to get women back to work and you want to get huge dollars poured into the community and you want to bid on the lowest risk opportunities, that's where you should be investing in women-founded companies.
And I'm going to go ahead and bring on some of your partners. But before I do, I'm going to say hello to some members who are joining us in the stream. Phil from St. Louis, Mark from California, Sandra from Florida, Wesley from Denver, Ali from Paris, and Sharon from Canada. Thanks for joining us on Business Unusual. We're having a conversation around how we can get more capital in the hands of female-founded companies. And with that, I want to bring on your partner, Vivian Sue, as well as Sheila Talton from Gray Matter Analytics. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Unusual. Sheila, I want to start with you. Talk us through a little bit about Gray Matter. You were How Women Lead's first female founder in the fund. What was the fundraising process like for you before you got in touch with Julie and the team? And tell us a little bit about your company.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for having us. And this is a great way to kick off this great fund that Julie and her LPs have founded. Gray Matter Analytics is a software as a service company focused in healthcare. We actually provide analytics to help hospital systems as well as health insurers to improve the quality of care while also managing the cost of care. Many of you are aware that there are new payment models that, as a result of the Affordable Care Act and some things that CMS is doing, that really use data and analytics as a way to determine what services will be reimbursed that are provided by hospital systems. So we're really excited about being the number one first investment by How Women Invest. And the process, I tell you, for women of color to raise capital is one that is very, very difficult. I am an individual that happens to have a lot of relationships and have been afforded to be able to reach out and raise some angel funding. And then I was fortunate of being able to use funds of my own. But if you look at the data, as Julie talked about, when women of color actually are able to raise venture money, those companies tend to be much later stage and should have been able to raise money, in a much earlier stage compared to a lot of white male run founded companies.
And Vivian, your background is in finance. The data and the numbers are pointing to just the return on investment that women of color bring to their LPs. What are investors missing? Why aren't the numbers changing?
Yeah, well, so with my background primarily has been in publicly traded stocks, managing mutual fund portfolios. The one thing is that we always remind people a good company does not equal a good stock. The missing link is that sometimes the valuation is just a little too rich or is fair. And in this case, seeing the numbers that of women founded companies, as well as potentially, and the women of color, that the statistics that Julie just so investors do that. There's one. It is a story of behavioral finance. We all have biases, unintended biases, and when we don't check ourselves as investors, sometimes we'll just omit and overlook some of the really good opportunities. So the reason I chose to participate along with How Women Invest is because of a very high quality group of women, over 100 of us, all with different areas of expertise, grouping together to provide support in due diligence whenever our expertise is needed. And then also, as Julie said, we might be able to help with the pipeline of finding these underdiscovered entrepreneurs.
Sheila, when you hear Vivian say something like underdiscovered entrepreneurs, there are so many women of color right now founding businesses. What do investors stand to lose if they don't figure this out in the near term?
In my opinion, they stand to lose a lot relative to investment opportunities. I mean, if you just look at the demographics alone, if you can't 20 years from now say that there's going to be enough white male founded companies to invest in, because the demographics are telling you that our country is browning and we're half as women, the population. So if investors don't find us, they're not going to be able to return the returns to their investors themselves.
Julie, what Sheila was talking about earlier was really just the importance of capital. Of course, we need to get funding in the hands of these women, but it's also a matter of resources and access to networks. How is How Women Lead supporting these founders outside of just writing a check?
Well, in addition to our 100 LPs, the limited partners or the investors in this fund, we also have a network of 13,000 women with the How Women Lead, the nonprofit that's fueled and founded the How Women Invest entity. And so we can call on all of them. They all buy into the sort of credo of helping each other and supporting, elevating women's voices and opportunities. So we can call on them to find talent. We can call on them to find venture relationships. We know most women venture capitalists are part of our network, at least in the Bay Area. And then we're able to also get them deal opportunities. So it's sort of like you got 13,000 people behind you really cheering for you, opening doors, and otherwise making sure you're feeling successful. So we kind of feel pretty bullish that we can propel great women founders into the stratosphere. We're gonna make a lot of money, and we're going to help support those founders, create a lot of jobs.
I love that. Making money, that's always good. Vivian, from a finance perspective, how important is it for these founders to be supported, not just through one round, but through many rounds throughout their business? I know that you're thinking about not just writing one check for one round, but how Women Lead can invest in them long term. Talk us through why that's important, particularly for the life cycle of an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's a great question. Now that I've actually had both perspectives, I started my career as an investor. In the past few years, I've also been an entrepreneur. So I knew the pain, but now I feel the pain with each round of fundraising. And this is not an exception just for women, but it is when it's harder. And all the entrepreneurs, as successful entrepreneurs, are juggling more balls in the air at any given time than they probably should or can handle. And just to make the fundraising a little bit harder than needed can jeopardize the success of the company, just operations and the whole team. So that is a huge issue. And if the funders treat it like, we're not to say that any specific group is doing that, but sometimes, it's like, let's do a competition. Let's see who wins. And you have a winning dollar and congratulations, you just won, $20,000 pitch prize. Well, what about afterwards? And if each hurdle is so hard for women, it's just hurdle after hurdle. So we've designed it so that when investors recommit, the capital call are in phases and reserved so that we have the ability to support the entrepreneurs longer and as the success happens, then push more money towards where success is.
I'm going to go ahead and say hello to some more members who are joining us in the stream right now. Kenneth from Cincinnati, Caitlin from Seattle, Latricia from Atlanta, Gerald from Washington, D.C., and Clarissa from Florida. Thanks for joining us on Business Unusual. I also want to reintroduce the poll that we have for you in the stream today, which is about the rise of telehealth. Do you think virtual visits will become a permanent part of how doctors care for patients? A, yes, B, no, or C, are you unclear? Vote in the stream, but also tell us your comments behind your vote. And Sheila, I'd be remiss not to have you vote in the stream because of Gray Matter's focus in healthcare. Talk to us about what you're seeing with telehealth right now. And also, I want to know your vote. Will virtual visits be a thing post-pandemic as well? And will insurers pay for them is my main question.
Yes, 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 and yes. And I will tell you, all of our customers and clients that are hospitals have seen a tenfold increase in telehealth during this pandemic. And insurers are paying for these visits. They are going to start to apply analytics, which I'm really happy about, on the quality of those visits. As you can imagine, most insurers would like to see those visits have a video component to them, because oftentimes physicians and clinicians, they need to look at the patient and see how they're actually reacting to some of the questions that they will be asking them relative to their health and whatever particular treatment that they are in the middle of. But yes, absolutely, tenfold increase has been a result, and it will be here to stay. We have a shortage of clinicians in this country. And so as a result of that, telehealth also improves the overall efficiency of clinicians and physicians.
Well, we have Sheila's vote in the poll, A, yes, but we also want to know all the members in the stream what you're thinking, so let us know. Julie, Sheila's talking about the rise of telehealth. This is one of many opportunities that have come up in this pandemic when it comes to founding businesses. I'm curious, in your conversations with female founders right now who are going through this pandemic, what are some of the things that are top of mind? How are they thinking about launching a company during this challenging time?
Well, one thing you should know, if you look historically, the majority of all the coolest businesses start out of economic downturns because you get laid off or whatever, you got, something's going on where you have extra space and time to put your energy to work. And so this is a great time to start a company. This is when Airbnb started, lots of history. One of the things that you got to be paying attention to, though, is, what are the challenges that are unique to this time? We're frankly lucky that we didn't do all our investing before March 15th because we would have made different decisions. The supply chain is super broken. And so, we are more focused on companies that have a serious technology solution and frankly are more enterprise opportunities or B2B. This is the moment. This is when you can find more talent. This is when you actually, now we have enough information that we're going to be in this place for a while. People need solutions to solve problems that this pandemic is bringing up for us. And somebody's like Sheila said, telehealth isn't going away. Like, there's so many things that are not going away.
Vivian, I'll pose the same question to you, but would love some context and perspective into how this crisis, say, may be different for founders than the last recession in terms of opportunities that may come out of it or how it's going to impact the startup landscape long term.
Yeah, I think first on the positive, the pandemic did start at a point where our economy is strong, and in recent years, in 08, 09, we've gone through the downturn. So some things are still fresh on people's memory. So as we can see, first with government, the PPP and reaction tends to be faster because we've learned from before. Same thing for VCs and for entrepreneurs. I've heard that some VCs have immediately reached out to their portfolio companies with assistance, with advice. So just a lot faster reaction. I think out of this pandemic, there's so much tragedy that's happened, but at the same time, for some entrepreneurs that happen to be in the areas that are critical need that can help the situation, they will emerge with stronger and more resilient.
And Sheila, on top of this pandemic, we're having a large conversation across the country of ridding systems of racism. Are we going to get there with venture capital? How do you think that the current dialogue around this issue is going to shape what venture capital looks like and where they're spending their money long term?
I think it's brought an awareness of a lot of the venture capital firms, but I do feel it's going to take the leadership of a fund and funds like the one that Julie and team have formed to show the way. I'm getting a lot of inbound from a lot of venture funds, but again, I'm later stage, right? But I believe that we will get there, but I do think it's going to take the leadership of women-run and women-led funds to show the way.
Well, and this is the thing, Carolyn, I'm sorry to interrupt here, but women who are women have more wealth than we've ever had before. And women who are what we call an accredited investor, someone who meets a certain threshold of wealth, it's $200,000 of income over the last 2 years, that, for example, is one of the measures. We have lots of women who meet that standard, and only 5% of us are investing in startups, but over 30% of men who meet that standard are investing. And so women, we can try to get the venture funds that have been in existence to change their behavior, and we should. But as women, you know what? We can all band together and we can create a whole bunch of funds like the one that we just launched. And that's what I want people to know. I want women to step into their power, own their wealth, use it for good, and make a lot of money as a result.
Well, Julie, I think that's a great note to end on. Let's band together as women and step into our power. I know I speak for the stream when I say Julie, Sheila, Vivian, thank you so much for joining us on Business Unusual. I've learned so much, and we thank your leadership in this space right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline, for having us.
That was the team at How Women Invest and How Women Lead talking to us about their new debut fund focused on investing in women of color. I want to thank them all for joining us on today's show. This is Business Unusual, a live show coming to you every day from the LinkedIn news page at 12 Eastern. We have the poll for you for the day, and we have the results, which we talked about the rise of telehealth and how we're thinking about virtual visits in the long term. An overwhelming majority of you told us on the LinkedIn news page, as well as in the stream, that yes, virtual visits will become a thing forever, and even after this pandemic is over. We have votes from Evelyn, Jewel, Sharon, Patrick, Rita, Rob, Shay, Rajandra, Bobby, Teresa, Haley, and William all saying yes. But we have some no's from Ambrose and Kathy, and Kristen and Darlin are unclear. I want to thank you all for joining us on Business Unusual and for voting in today's poll. In just 90 minutes, we have another show for you that we want to make sure that you check out. LinkedIn News Editor-in-Chief Dan Roth will be interviewing Misty Copeland. She's an internationally renowned dancer who climbed to stardom after being named the first Black principal dancer at the American Ballet Theater. They'll be talking about her career and how COVID has affected the performing art world. That show you don't want to miss. It's going to be today from the LinkedIn news page at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Thank you so much for joining us.